In this video, we are going to go through complex sentences. So what exactly is a complex sentence? Well, it consists of a dependent clause and an independent clause. If you remember, a dependent clause is a phrase. It's a group of words that is not a sentence. Whereas an independent clause, also called a main clause, is a sentence. It can stand on its own. So to make a complex sentence, we have to add a non-sentence, which is not the same as nonsense, but a non-sentence to a sentence, and this will equal a complex sentence. Let's take a look. The boy who lived next door went fishing last weekend. So this may strike you as a rather simple sentence, but remember, if I got rid of everything after that red mark, and I said the boy who lived next door, that in itself would not be a complete sentence. This is what we call a relative clause. It refers to the boy and it describes the boy. But because of this clause, we now have a sentence that is a complex sentence. It combines the boy went fishing last week with this relative clause. So you can think of a relative clause, therefore, must be a type of dependent clause. B, skipping merrily down the road, Sally waved at her friends. So here we have the dependent clause that begins with skipping merrily down the road. So this describes Sally, and therefore this is a complex sentence. Because remember, skipping merrily down the road is not a sentence in of itself. Sally waved at her friends is a sentence. And so just like that, a non-sentence dependent clause plus an independent clause gives us a complex sentence. Now, typically, when we are using or creating complex sentences, we use these conjunctions. These are called subordinating conjunctions. So, let's take a look at C. Though he was late for class, he walked slowly down the hall. The thing about subordinating conjunctions, they take a sentence, he was late for class, and they go in front of it, in front of that sentence. And by doing so, they no longer make a sentence. Though he was late for class, that is not a sentence. It is a dependent clause. And we add that to, he walked slowly down the hall, which is a sentence. A dependent clause plus a sentence equals a complex sentence. Let's look at D. After running a mile, Barry sat down exhausted. Another example. After. Point in time. After this happened, Barry sat down. Barry sat down exhausted is a sentence. Of course, after running a mile is not a sentence. And we have here, again, this word after. That shows us that we are now dealing with a complex sentence because we've taken a dependent clause, or we've taken a not sentence, and we've added it to a sentence. Finally, there is E. He was already full and needed only a glass of water. Now, my question is E a complex sentence? And you may pause, you may think, you may look, and you may say, yeah, because and I said something about conjunctions. The thing is, we always want to make sure that we are combining, when we have a complex sentence, separate sentence. He was already full and needed only a glass of water. This sentence, however, is not complex. In the lesson on compound sentences, we'll see that the conjunctions, also known as the fanboys, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can go to the video on that. Those will create compound sentences, but just because you have an and here, and he is either A or he is A and B, two things, already full and needed a glass of water, oops, that's B, that doesn't mean that you have a complex sentence. Again, you need these subordinating conjunctions to make sure that you have a complete sentence. And you can't simply have the word and here. That would not give us a complex sentence. The first type of non-simple sentence we have is a compound sentence. And the next series of sentences, starting with compound, complex, and then on to compound, complex, pay attention to the way that sentences are created. You're going to see that they're oftentimes conjunctions or commas. And once you get a sense of how these conjunctions and commas are used and how phrases come together, your own writing is going to become much more varied and sophisticated. So this is a good thing. Otherwise, if you only write in simple sentences, your writing is going to seem very boring and monotonous. So let's see how we can make our writing better. First off, we can use compound sentences that join together two independent clauses. Now again, an independent clause is a sentence. Whenever you see independent clause, just think, oh, sentence. So compound sentence joins two sentences together with a conjunction. These conjunctions are given a name. And there's a lesson on it called Fanboys, coordinating conjunctions. So here we have a few of them. Now the key here is not to necessarily note that so stands for S, that has its own video, but this is a coordinating conjunction that is connecting two sentences. So when we have sentence plus sentence connected with the conjunction, we have a compound sentence. So let's look at A. John is taking 7 classes this semester. That's a sentence. He has no time to play soccer. That is another sentence. They are both independent clauses joined by so, and therefore we have a compound sentence. Let's look at B. Mary was hoping to get into the calculus class, but she was not able to pass the entrance exam. Again, Mary was hoping to get into the calculus class is a sentence. She was not able to pass the entrance exam is also a sentence. And notice here our conjunction but. And just like that, we have a compound sentence. Let's take a look at one more. He was an excellent swimmer, and his friend was a great distance runner. Again, two independent clauses. They're both sentences. Each one can stand on its own. Each one has a subject and a verb. And just like that, with the use of comma and the word and, we have a compound sentence. In this video, we are going to go through a compound complex sentence. You should have already gone through a compound and a complex sentence video, so you know each one. Now we're going to put them together. Let's take a look here. Compound complex sentence combines a compound sentence with a complex sentence. Not surprising. Let's have a look. John was a triathlete who trained every day, but he was still unable to finish the Ironman triathlon. Okay. First sentence, John was a triathlete who trained every day. Why is this a complex sentence? Because it has this relative clause here. Relative clauses often begin with who or that or which. And we have a video on those, so please check that out if you're unsure what the relative clause is. And just like that, we have our complex sentence. So this part, the underlined part, is complex. The squiggly part now is going to be the next. So I'm going to squiggly the independent clause. And why is this independent? It is a sentence that can stand on its own. He was still unable to finish the Ironman triathlon is a sentence connected with the conjunction but, that is comma, but. And just like that, we've taken a complex sentence, the underlined part, and combined it, the squiggly part here, with an independent clause. And this has given us a compound complex sentence. Let's look at B. Though John trained every day, he was unable to finish the Ironman triathlon. So is this a compound complex sentence? That's my question. Well, we have here our subordinating conjunction, and we know that subordinating conjunction takes this sentence, John trained every day, turns it into a non-sentence or a dependent clause that needs, it's dependent, it needs what? An independent clause. And that's great because now we have a complex sentence. He was unable to finish the Ironman triathlon. However, we do not have a compound complex sentence because we need to combine a complex sentence, which is from here. This is our complex sentence down to here. But we don't have anything more. And so you can see we can basically communicate the same thought, but in a different sentence or a different form. That is, this is a compound complex sentence, and this is simply a complex sentence. The only thing we lose here is that John is a triathlete. So again, when you're writing, you want to be able to vary up your sentence structure. And if you want to say that John is a triathlete in B, but you can't squeeze it in there, then you may want to write a sentence like A, where You can squeeze it in there, but in doing so, you're going to change it from a complex to a compound sentence. That's absolutely fine as long as you remember your punctuation, and in this case here, your coordinating conjunction. Okay, let's take a look at a couple more. When David arrives in the afternoon, we will be able to eat out, but we will not have enough time to go shopping. Is this a compound complex sentence? Here's when. It's dependent hints that we have, or signals that we have, a dependent clause that ends with we will not be able to eat out. Notice here is a comma, here is the word but, followed by another independent clause. Therefore, this is compound complex. David, comma, who's arriving this afternoon, will not have enough time to go shopping. Is this compound complex? Well, notice here we have David. It's set off by the who. You'll later learn that this is called a non-essential clause. However, that's more advanced. You can go to the clauses video to learn about that. However, this is not a compound complex sentence. Notice what's missing. Well, what's missing here is a conjunction, the comma conjunction that we saw in the other compound complex sentences. So this is not a compound sentence. It is a complex sentence, but we're going for compound complex. And so if you were able to tell the difference between the two, excellent. If not, go back over the compound and complex videos and then come back to this one and see if you know why A, B, and C, and D are the type of sentences that they are. In this video, we are going to talk about the comma splice. It is a very common error in writing. And because we're talking here about different types of sentences, compound, complex, and also we're talking about sentence fragments, it's very important to understand what a comma splice is. First off, it's the use of a comma to break up two sentences or two independent clauses. And if that is the case, if you do see a comma splice, then instead of using a comma, you want to use a semicolon, a full stop or a period, or a comma with one of the conjunctions. So if you go back to the coordinating conjunctions in the compound sentence, that's a perfect example. So you don't want to put comma and forget the and then think you can stick another independent clause on there. If you do that, that is a comma splice. So let's take a look. Mike studied diligently each night, comma, he was able to get straight A's. What should we have here in this sentence? We should have one of the fanboys, comma, so. But we do not have this coordinating conjunction. It's absent. Instead, we just have a comma. And therefore, this comma is incorrect. And that error is called a comma splice. And therefore, to change it, we have to either add a conjunction, such as so, in this case, makes sense, or add a semicolon. Or another option is even to put a full stop or a period. If you do a period, then make sure that the sentence is not too choppy, because when we write, we want to make sure our sentences flow. So compare Mike studied diligently each night. He was able to get straight A's. I read that as though there was a full stop or a period. But the sentences flow a lot better if you use compound sentences. So with so, it would be Mike studied diligently each night, so he was able to get straight A's. Let's go on to B. Though he practiced the piano 2 hours each day, he still could not master the sonata. It was so difficult. If I gave this sentence to, I'd say 70% of high school students, and maybe I'm being a little bit cynical, so let's say 70% of middle school students, they would think that this sentence is absolutely fine. And it's not that the state of our education is necessarily poor. The problem is when people see sentences, they do not rely on grammatical rules, they rely on their ears. So if I read this sentence B, it sounds absolutely fine, but it is not. There is a comma splice. See if you can spot it. Okay, now let's have a look together. Though we practice subordinating conjunction, dependent clause, 2 hours each day, comma, he still could not master the sonata. We have a nice complex sentence. We have this independent clause after day, all up to sonata. And then, what happens? We should have a comma and a conjunction, but we don't. We just have comma it. And here is our comma splice. And just like that, we've identified it. So watch out for this in your own writing, because it's something that can really weigh down or prevent you from writing effectively.